Shalom, my friend. What I'm about to share with you today is something most people will live their entire lives without ever discovering. It's a quiet practice, a sacred rhythm that has lived inside Jewish homes for more than 3,000 years. Hidden inside an ancient Hebrew psalm is a declaration so powerful, so deeply rooted in Torah wisdom, that families across every generation have whispered it during their hardest financial seasons and watched the heavens respond. This isn't something you'll find in modern self-help books. It isn't trending on social media. It has been passed quietly from father to son, from mother to daughter, from one trembling hand into another, read at a very specific hour, in a very specific way, with a very specific intention burning behind every word. And I believe with my whole heart that if you are watching this right now, it is not by accident. You are meant to hear what I am about to say. Welcome back to this sacred space where we gently lift the veil on the hidden teachings of Torah, the deep mysteries of Kabbalah, and the timeless prosperity wisdom that has carried Jewish families through poverty, exile, persecution, and unimaginable hardship into seasons of abundance that defied every logical explanation. But before I open this practice to you, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly in the quiet of your own heart. Has there been a season in your life, maybe right now, where no matter how hard you work, the money seems to slip through your fingers like water? You wake up early. You stay up late. You skip the things you love. You say no to the small joys. And still, by the end of the month, the numbers don't add up. A bill arrives that you didn't expect. The car breaks down the same week the rent is due. A medical expense appears out of thin air. And you find yourself sitting at your kitchen table at midnight, staring at a calculator, wondering how you got here when you've done nothing but try. Maybe you've prayed about it more times than you can count. Maybe you've cried out to God in the shower so no one would hear you. Maybe you've asked the question that haunts every honest soul. Why does it feel like I'm running on a wheel that never stops? Why does it feel like the harder I push, the deeper I sink? If anything I'm describing is touching you right now, I need you to lean in and hear me clearly. You are not lazy. You are not forgotten. You are not being punished by heaven. There is no curse following you. But something is happening in the unseen atmosphere around your home. Something quiet and stubborn that has been holding back what was already written with your name on it. In our tradition, we have a beautiful and ancient word called parnasa. It means more than income. It means more than salary. Parnasa is the divine river of provision that flows from the source of all life into every soul that walks the earth. The Talmud teaches us something that should stop you in your tracks. It says that every single person's parnasa for the entire year, every coin, every loaf of bread, every opportunity, is decided and written in the heavenly ledger between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Think about that for a moment. Your provision is not random. It is not waiting to be earned through more sweat. It has already been measured out, weighed, and assigned to you by name. But here is where so many sincere people get stuck, and where this teaching becomes life-changing. Just because something is written for you in heaven does not mean it can find its way into your hands. Imagine a great reservoir, full to the brim, with crystal-clear water meant for your home. The water exists. The pressure is there. The pipes are laid. But somewhere along that pipe, deep underground, there is a blockage. And so when you turn on the faucet expecting a flood, you get only a few sad drops. That is not a failure of the water. That is not a failure of the source. That is a blockage in the channel. And spiritually, this is exactly what happens when financial struggle takes up residence in a home that was meant for blessing. The provision is real. The blessing has been allocated. But something stands between the source and the soul. And for 30 centuries, our families have known how to clear that blockage, not with elaborate ceremonies, not with expensive objects, not with anything you have to buy, only with sacred words, spoken at the right hour, with a heart that finally believes again. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Rivka. because her story is the story of so many. Rivka lost her husband 3 winters ago. He passed without warning, leaving her alone with 2 young boys and a small apartment in a city where the rent climbed higher every spring. She found work cleaning offices in the early morning hours and tutoring children in the afternoons. She did not complain. She did not waste. She did not buy herself new clothes or eat at restaurants. And yet, every single month, the money disappeared before she could understand where it had gone. She told me once, with tears she was trying to hide, that she felt as though her purse had a hole sewn into the bottom of it that no one could see. The money went in, and the money went out, and nothing she did made any difference at all. One Shabbat afternoon, Rivka went to visit an elderly neighbor in our community, a woman well into her 90s who had lived through things most of us could not survive in our worst nightmares. This old woman had buried family members in places too painful to name. She had crossed oceans with nothing but the clothes on her back. And yet, in her tiny apartment filled with the smell of fresh challah and old books, there was a quiet, unshakable peace. She always had enough. She always had a little extra to slip into the hand of someone who needed it more. Rivka, with the desperation only a struggling mother knows, finally asked her, "What is your secret? How is it that you, of all people, never seem to lack?" The old woman set down her tea, looked at Rivka with eyes that had seen entire centuries, and said something that Rivka would carry with her for the rest of her life. "Every morning, before the sun crests the rooftops, I rise from my bed and I read the 23rd Psalm. But I do not read it the way the world reads it. I do not read it as a poem for the dying. I do not read it as something pretty to put on a wall. I read it as a covenant. I read it as if the Holy One himself is standing across from me at my table, and I am reminding him and reminding myself that he has promised to be my shepherd, and a shepherd does not let his sheep go hungry." Now I know what you might be thinking. The 23rd Psalm? Everyone has heard the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. What could possibly be hidden there that the world has not already exhausted? And that, my friend, is exactly the trap. Familiarity has stolen the fire from this psalm for almost everyone who hears it. We've heard it whispered at funerals. We've seen it printed on sympathy cards. We've watched it recited in films when a character is afraid. And somewhere along the way, the world stopped hearing what David, the shepherd boy turned king, was actually declaring when he wrote it. So let me bring you back to what our tradition has heard in these words for thousands of years, and I promise you, by the time we are finished, you will never read this psalm the same way again. The first key is hidden in the very opening line. In Hebrew, David writes, "Adonai roi, lo exar." The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. That word exar is heavier than English can carry. It does not simply mean want in the casual sense of wishing for something. It means deficiency. It means deprivation. It means the very state of poverty itself. And David is not sitting on a hillside writing soft poetry. He is a man who has slept in caves, hunted for survival, run from kings, and faced lions with nothing but a staff. He is making a courtroom declaration before the highest tribunal in existence. He is saying, "Because the Holy One himself is my shepherd, lack has no legal standing in my life. Poverty has no jurisdiction here." Do you understand the weight of that? This is not optimism. This is not affirmation. This is a verdict spoken from a man who has bled for what he believes, declaring a spiritual law that he stakes his entire life upon. And it is the very law that carried him from the mud of a sheep field to the throne of a kingdom. This is where the old woman's practice becomes so important. She did not read this psalm in her head. She did not mumble it half awake. She rose before the sun, stood on her own 2 feet in her own kitchen, and spoke every single word out loud, with breath in her lungs and conviction in her voice. Why before the sunrise? Because the Zohar, the great fountain of Kabbalistic teaching, tells us that the final hours of the night, just before dawn breaks, are the hours when the gates of heaven lean closest to the earth. It is the hour when sincere words travel furthest, when divine attention bends low to listen, when the world is quiet enough for your soul to actually be heard above the noise. Rivka began this practice the very next morning. She rose while her boys were still sleeping. She stood in the dim light of her kitchen, and she spoke the psalm aloud, slowly, deliberately, as if she meant every syllable. She told me afterward that something she could not explain happened in that first reading. A weight she had been dragging for years began to slide off her shoulders. Within the first week, a family she had cleaned for 2 years earlier called her completely without warning, asking if she was available again, and offering nearly twice what they had paid before. Within a month, her entire situation had been turned on its head. Was this magic? No. We do not believe in magic. We believe in alignment. When you speak holy words with a sincere heart and a focused intention, you tune the frequency of your own life to the frequency of divine provision. You clear the blockage. You open the pipe. And what was always written for you, what was always meant to find you, finally has a clear path to walk into your home. Now stay with me, because the second key in this psalm is the one most people walk past without ever noticing. It is the verse where David says that God prepares a table before him in the presence of his enemies. The world reads that line and thinks of human enemies, jealous neighbors, difficult co-workers, people who wish them harm. But the sages saw something far deeper. In the Kabbalistic understanding, there are spiritual forces, accusing voices, that stand in the heavenly court and argue against your blessing. They point to your past mistakes. They highlight every moment of doubt you've ever had. They build a case for why the provision should be withheld. And here is what is so absolutely staggering about David's words. He does not say that God removes the accusers first and then sets the table. He says the table is set in their very presence. The opposition is still there. The accusations are still being whispered. The bills are still on the counter. And yet the Holy One pulls out a chair for you and lays a feast in front of you anyway, while every voice that ever doubted you is forced to stand there and watch in silence. Do you understand what this means for your life right now, in this very season? It means you do not have to wait until the storm has passed to be fed. It means you do not have to fix everything before the blessing can find you. It means God is fully capable of prospering you in the middle of the mess, with the debt still on the page and the worry still in your chest. So when you reach this verse in your morning reading, I want you to stop, close your eyes, and actually see it. See a long table set in the middle of your living room. See it draped in white linen. See plates piled with everything you have been waiting for. The phone call you have been hoping for. The opportunity you stopped believing was possible. The relief you have begged for in the dark. See it laid out in front of you, and see every shadow that has ever opposed your prosperity standing along the walls, unable to do anything but witness it, and then say out loud, with no shame and no hesitation, "This table belongs to me." The Holy One himself prepared it, and nothing in heaven or on earth has the authority to take it away from me. This is not New Age thinking. This is not modern manifestation. This is a declaration our grandfathers made in basements and attics and ghettos and tents, and it has carried our people through every kind of darkness imaginable. Now we come to the third key, and I want you to hear me carefully here, because this is the part that even deeply religious people sometimes miss entirely. There is a teaching in the Zohar that I cannot get out of my mind, even after all these years. It says that divine blessing flows like a river, and a river only continues to flow if it has somewhere to pour itself out. If a river has no outlet, it stops, it pools, it grows stagnant. But when the river has an opening, when it has somewhere to give itself away, the source pushes more water through it, faster and stronger and fuller than before. What does this mean for you? It means the secret to receiving more is, almost paradoxically, learning to give first. Not after you feel safe, not after you see the abundance arrive. First, while the resources still feel small, while the giving still costs something real. In Hebrew, this giving is called tzedakah, and the word does not actually translate to charity the way English uses it. It comes from the root tzedek, which means righteousness, justice, the way things are meant to be. When you give tzedakah, you are not performing an act of optional kindness. You are restoring the proper flow of wealth through the world. You are participating in divine justice. There is a story in the Talmud about a man named Binyamin the Righteous, who was responsible for managing the charity fund of his community during a terrible drought. A widow came to him with 7 small children, all starving. The fund was empty. The shelves were bare. He had nothing left to give. So he reached into his own pocket and gave her every coin he had, leaving himself with nothing. Some time later, Binyamin became gravely ill. The Talmud tells us that the angels themselves stood before the throne and argued his case. "Master of the universe," they said, "this man saved a widow and 7 children. He saved 8 worlds. Should such a man be taken so soon?" And his life was extended by 22 years. And not only was his life extended, his circumstances were transformed. He did not merely survive, he flourished. Because when he poured himself out completely, he opened a channel so wide that the heavens could not help but pour back through it. This is the principle that makes the 23rd Psalm come alive at its deepest level. When David says that his cup overflows, he is not describing a man who barely has enough. He is describing a cup so full that it spills over the edge onto the floor, onto the table, onto the people around him. And a cup only overflows when there is somewhere for the overflow to go. So here is the practice in its fullness, exactly as it has been done in our homes for generations. Tonight, before you go to sleep, take any small amount of money, whatever you can spare, even a single coin. Place it in an envelope and set it somewhere visible. As you set it down, say out loud, "I am opening the channel. I am making space for what has already been written for me." Then, in the morning, rise before the sun. Stand somewhere quiet in your home. Open to the 23rd Psalm and read it aloud, slowly, from beginning to end. When you reach the line about the Lord being your shepherd, pause and declare that lack has no authority in your home. When you reach the verse about the table, pause and see it set before you in your mind, and declare that no force can take it from you. When you reach the line about the overflowing cup, place your hand on the envelope you set out the night before, and declare that as you give, the source multiplies what flows back. And when you reach the final verse about goodness and mercy following you, speak it slowly, knowing that you are not just reading old words. You are stepping into a covenant older than any economy, sturdier than any market, more reliable than any system human hands have ever built. These 3 threads, the spoken declaration, the inner vision, and the outward act of giving, are not separate practices. They are one rope, woven together, strong enough to pull you out of any pit you find yourself in. The Pirkei Avot teaches that the world stands on 3 pillars, on Torah, on prayer, and on acts of loving kindness. When you do this practice, you are touching all 3 at the same time. The psalm itself is Torah. Reading it with intention is prayer. The tzedakah is loving kindness. You are standing on every pillar at once, which is why this practice has outlasted empires that tried to erase our people from the earth. I am not promising you that money will fall from the ceiling. That is not how the Holy One works, and it is not what our tradition teaches. But I am telling you, with everything I have learned and everything I have witnessed, that when you align your words, your vision, and your giving with these ancient truths, the blockages begin to crack. The channel begins to open, and what was always meant for you starts moving toward you, slowly at first, and then like a river finally breaking through. So here is what I am asking you to do. Tonight, before you sleep, set aside your tzedakah, no matter how small. Tomorrow morning, before the sun rises, stand in your home and read the 23rd Psalm out loud. Speak the declarations, see the table, open the channel, and then come back to the comments below this video and write the words, "My parnasa is flowing." When you say it publicly, you seal it. You set it in motion. You create a witness in the world for what heaven is preparing in private. And if there is someone in your life right now whose shoulders are bent under the weight of financial fear, please share this with them today. Sometimes a single piece of ancient wisdom, arriving at exactly the right moment, can change the entire direction of a life. If this teaching has stirred something inside you, subscribe to this channel and stay close. Because next week I am going to open the doors on the ancient Kabbalistic practice of Havdalah, the sacred closing of Shabbat, and how Jewish families have used this Saturday night ritual for centuries to draw fresh blessing into the week ahead. Until then, may the one who blessed our ancestors, Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov, Rachel and Leah, bless you with Parnasa Tova, with a livelihood that is good and abundant and overflowing. May your home be full of shalom. May your table be full of plenty. And may your heart finally rest in the certainty that you have been provided for today, tomorrow, and always. Trust the wisdom. Speak the words. Open the channel. And step forward into the abundance that has been waiting for you all along. Shalom.